Yeah, so thank you, Frank. So it seems like everybody left BCG and got on to some real work. Yeah, I'm still sticking with them. So yeah, let's see. So my talk today is a bit how do we generate value? And I mean, Jochen said it when somebody asked the question about do you green? He said, well, it needs to be a business case. And in my talk today, I would argue a bit, there is a business case behind this, but without digitalization, so being transparent on what is green, you cannot capture the value. And I would show you some examples how to capture value. But maybe starting, I mean, in Munich, we have the IEA, and we see a lot of nice cars from Europe as well as from China. And the question for me is, in 4 to 5 years, will we talk, of course, features and range and all those things, but will we also talk about what's the product carbon footprint of the car you have in front? Will you say this car embeds 8 tons of CO2 or 16 tons of CO2 because you have a dirty battery in it? Will we see this? I have the hope that we will see it. The question is whether we see it in 4 to 5 years. I think there's huge speed, and let's, I would say, hope for that, and maybe we see it also for buses. And what gives me hope is, and I don't want to go through it, but what we looked at all major steel buyers, do they have commitments? And with that, I mean SBTi commitments. And do they have Scope 3 upstream commitments? And I mean, you could update this page probably monthly and it changes. But what you see is a lot of companies have Scope 3 upstream commitments. And this means they care somehow about the carbon embedded in their products. So this gives me hope for the 3 to 5 years. But maybe do one step back. When we talk about greenness of materials or companies, what is actually the measure? And there are 2 ways to measure it. On the right-hand side, let's start with this, is a corporate carbon footprint. This is what one company emits in a time of a year. And these are all scopes, these are direct allocated emissions and non-attributable process emissions, and you just sum it up. And this is, in my mind, to stay in business, most companies will need it to get listed somewhere, that you have a pathway, that you report, that you transparently report, and so on. However, this will not give you yet the green premium or the green value. For that, you need a product carbon footprint. And this means every product which leaves your warehouse needs to have a number attached to it, what is embedded in that. And not just like a green brand, which we see coming up everywhere, but really a number cradle to gate. And this is not easy to do this, and for that we need digitalization. So maybe stick with corporate carbon footprint first. And for that, you need a tool. Of course, in companies we go to, they sum it up somehow once a year, multiple Excels, usually the sustainability department does it and reports it. But that cannot be the solution. Ideally, we have August just passed, you would like to have the accrued emissions until August, and ideally a forecast what you as a company will emit until the end of the year so that you can plan and see whether your goals are fulfilled. And for that, there are tools out there. We usually as BCG use one tool. This is called CO2 AI. We incubated this and spun it off. That's now an independent venture funded by PE companies. And what this tool does, it plunges in all your data sources and try to automate your emissions to calculate. Also has the ability to exchange emissions, so from your suppliers, plug them in with a CDP setup protocol. We are cooperating there, and it has simulator, and it has get also recommendations what you can do. There are multiple tools out there. The problem with those tools is how company specific are they and how can they be adjusted? Because if you produce yogurt versus steel cans, there's a difference in it. And how adjustable is this tool and how trustworthy is it? So I think without that, you will not be able to do a CO2 accounting real time, similar you do your financial accounting. This is the thing what you need, in my mind, to stay in business in the future, to get listed at CO2 or environmental conscious companies. So then moving further to the product carbon footprint, because I want to talk about how do I generate value out of green. And we did with our partner CDP a questionnaire, and we asked them, well, do you see PCF as a key enabler to do climate action work? And 2/3 said yes. But then, if you look, only 2% of the suppliers provide primary data. Yeah, so, and this we need to solve. And I think especially here, having also, a lot of raw materials, the question is, how do you supply primary trustworthy data, which you can pass on the value chain? Because at the end, we want to have the PCF for the car, or a fridge, or whatsoever. Yeah, this is, sorry to say, a consulting slide, but I just put it in because I somehow like it, and I only want to do a look at the left-hand side. So the question is always, do we think we generate value with the PCF? And I think, for the time being, if you have it, you will generate some value. But as you move the curve upward, as time passes, you will generate value. And the ones who do not offer it will lose value. And I think this is, in my mind, the biggest risk, because I see a lot of companies which are hesitant, say, yeah, I don't want to be the first mover, not sure if it pays off. But when do the fast follower actually should start? And that's the main question. I see a lot of hesitant, and I'm pushing clients to move along, because we believe, and I personally believe as well, that within a couple of years, if you don't offer it, you will lose against your competitor and becomes a risk. And that needs to be managed on your climate transition. How do you set up such a PCF framework? I mean, it's usually, of course, you need to have a use case. Yeah, don't do it if you don't believe in green premium. If you believe in it, do it. And then how do you start? You start looking at your data, your structure. You need to figure out where are your units, where do you measuring something in your company across all process steps you're having. Once you understand this data structure, then you need to say, okay, what emission factors do I plug against those units, volumes, tonnages, etc. And this is a big debate. So there are tons of databases out there which provide you emission factors. However, how trustworthy are they? It's questionable. We recommend, and their AI comes in, checking this against different databases and see where do you have a big standard deviation, where you don't have a big standard deviation, and then think of go deep in certain emission factors which change your emissions totally. But it's a big debate in the industry and a lot of, let's say, garbage in, garbage out. And then you model the value chain. That's the biggest effort to do, because you need to plug all those numbers in, and that you get a number of, I don't know, for the coil, which leaves your warehouse, etc. Tech stack, we usually use Python to program this, but there are other tech stacks you can use. And then, of course, once you have a PCF, what do you do with it? You need to tell your purchasing departments, well, our final PCF needs to develop. You need to buy different things. And you need to train your salespeople. How do I generate value when you have similar products with different PCFs? The example I can publicly talk about, because it's publicly known, we have done also with other clients, which I cannot name. We built a bespoke algorithm for Klöckner, and they can now, for all of their products which are leaving their warehouse, put a PCF number on it. It's certified by TÜV Süd according to ISO norm and GHG. It's real time, so you don't need to wait. So the sales guy sees on their screen what is in the warehouse, same product, different PCFs, what do I sell? And it is interconnected to their IT landscape. Of course, people will say, well, SAP will come out with a module, etc. We said we will not do SAP because it takes ages. We programmed a code where we said it links to all the data sources you have. It calculates outside SAP. or outside ERP, they have different systems, and feed it back into the SAP, into their warehouse management, all those things that you have the transparency across the value chain. And so here on the left-hand side, you see a bit of the code, this runs, it's certified, it's available, cradle to gate, very important. We went live almost a year ago, and then the question was, well, what do we do with it? Do we give it as a PDF certificate to the customers? Do we send it by email? Or is there a better way? And there we said, okay, maybe a platform way where you can log on as a client. And of course, if you want to download your PDF certificate, you can. But you have it also online. So you have its so-called PCF passport, CO2 passport. And what you also have, and this is what the clients like most, it gives you a recommendation. So you bought the following products last year, last month. There would be a greener alternative available. And it shows you exactly what greener versions are available. And this gives them transparency, and this triggers then, of course, a sales process. So it gives you two things. It gives you a digital PCF value, and it gives you greener alternatives. And now Frank said, blockchain is dead. We don't believe. We put this all on the blockchain because we believe that we will add more primary data on the blockchain. So Klöckner is a distributor. They deliver it to a stamper. The stamper could then also write their emissions. So it moves on to the blockchain. And we built the blockchain in that way, and it's also open knowledge. We did it together with Parity on a Polkadot blockchain because very energy efficient. And we set this up so that the industry can use this. Of course, you ask the question, well, how do you make sure that there's no garbage in, garbage out? We are in discussions with TÜV Süd that all values which are written on the blockchain get also certified according to norms, etc. So this is the stage where we are. It's all public knowledge. You can log on their website. They are also open to discuss with you things. Parity is open source. All those things are available. And I think this is needed to generate the value. I jump over this. This is just showing that we write on the blockchain. It will be available afterwards. But I think where I want to come to, you have done all of that, yeah? Large process. It took us 1.5 years from end to end to have it now written on the blockchain. Now the question is, how do you commercialize it? And of course, there's no full green premium yet there. It's a segment of one approach. So you need to figure out which customers, and it comes back to my SBTI slide in the beginning, who is willing to pay more, or who needs the green material more, in what CO2 reduction. And this is very difficult for salespeople because they need to spend a lot of time on small volumes, but they are building the market. And of course, the thing is always, how do you set up your sales force to sell gray versus green, and how much time you spend. But there is value, we see it. Of course, we cannot openly communicate, the euros per ton, but it is there. So pilot volumes increasing, and I would say in 24, 25, we will see significant volumes moving over. Maybe a bit jump back because we have a lot of alloy producers or people who deal with alloys, and I think especially for stainless steel, having this transparency from cradle to gate is very important. As you know, Scope 3 upstream emissions is almost everything there. And we have the discussion, Indonesian nickel pig iron versus nickel produced in Europe. How do you make this transparency and the trustworthiness? And I think in stainless, it's much more important than in carbon. But we don't see it yet. That there are a lot of movements in providing primary data, giving this to the market, and making also the momentum about green. I would like, before I open for questions, to say, well, we are all somehow leaders and we need to manage green. But I'm always saying, what's beyond green? And I think we need also already to think about at one point in time, probably in the beginning of the 2030s, we need to manage green and gray in our portfolio. And I think we have not really thought through this. Do our people want to work for gray? How do I run utilization up in gray? How do I price it? So all those things. There's one horizon further than green. We also need to think of how do we manage the full transition, that we are not loss-making at one point in time on gray. So with that, I'm happy to open for questions.
Thank you, Nicole. I don't know. Yes, it's working. I always have a question, and I think that is always the icebreaker for others to follow me, please. I think one of the big challenges when it comes to those tools is how do you handle actually the sheer amount of data? Because ultimately those data need to be available not only coming from a production side, they need to be available for the sales departments of steel, but also the procurement departments and the sales departments of their suppliers. They all need to handle those data. How do you envisage actually handling those data when, I'd say, 90%, 85% are still trading, buying, selling with email?
Exactly, it's a bit. We can capture it only if we move away from that. And what I can say is that holds also a lot of people back. So if I talk to clients, they're all saying exactly what you're saying, sheer amount of data, different systems, and that hinders them to start. So also, I mean, if you look at the Klöckner values, of course, they are not all primary data. They are assumed, adjusted, calculated, etc., of course, to have certified. But you need to start at one point in time, and I would urge everybody to start and not letting it down, because yes, you have all those 90% which do this, but getting started, it pushes everybody to more transparency.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience at the front? Just wait for the microphone so that you can be heard.
You mentioned the topic of PCFs of raw materials, and specifically nickel is, I think, a very good example where, based on where it comes from, the PCF can be drastically different. What do you say to those suppliers coming from, let's say, Indonesia, who might think, okay, it might be better not to report than to report our actual PCF because the global average is much lower?
Well, the thing is, I would say the ones who have a greener PCF, they should report. And then this urges the industry to ask the question, and then you see it. Of course, yeah, they will not provide a PCF, but the question, and they will also not make a green margin. And they probably have also, they will stay in business because there's still a huge market for gray. However, if you want to move to green, then you rather report it and get the transparency. And you need to educate your customers because they don't fully understand yet the huge difference between nickel, pig iron, and the rest.
One more question.
Yeah, one question on my side. Stefan Krüll, S17. Thank you, Nicole. Always really interesting to listen. You mentioned the automotive industry at the beginning, and my question is the following one. I mean, we know that there are two approaches when it comes to product carbon footprint calculation. The one is to take technology, emission factors, AI, and calculate basically values for an entire value chain. Yeah, this is what you presented. But in particular, the automotive industry, we see now is totally moving away because what they require is that each supply chain partner has to report primary supplier-specific PCFs on his own, and then they are aggregated in their own models like that are now being pursued with Catena F. So how do you look into the future? What is your expectation? Which approach is at the end of the day the one that will be most important for the steel and metal industry?
I think these are not contradicting approaches. That's exactly the same. So this is what we are saying. You put, basically, you your steel, it gets stamped, it gets banded, and so on, and everybody puts the emissions there. And then, of course, you can sum it up at intermediary steps or at the end. And of course, Catena X tries this. There are also other initiatives. The problem with Catena X, how I see it, they want to do it across all materials. And the problem is what we figured out just doing it for steel. It's so specific, you need deep industry knowledge to understand whether a value there written or an emission factor is right. And this is where Catena X, in my mind, has a disadvantage, that they want to do it for all those. And they don't have all the experts lined up for, electronics, plastics, steel, aluminum. And this is why, in my mind, it does not move. The question is whether, I don't know, what we have done will be part of Catena X and, adds up at the end. But the systems, in my mind, or the ideas behind this are all the same. We need to sum it up across the value chain, and we need to make sure that it's trustworthy, audible data. And which system at the end will, be the running system, I can say.
Yeah, I understand that a different approach in that way, that in the Catena X scenario, each and every supplier is responsible for calculating his emissions and reporting to any kind of system. Whereas in the approach that we have seen here is that one system is taking on that job for multiple supply chains and using AI and algorithms and assumptions to do that.
I mean, take it offline. I would say it's the same whether you sum it up at the tier one supplier and then give it up, or who provides it what. At the end, it all goes to primary data. So even a tier one supplier who assembles the electronic components needs to have access to the primary data before. And I'm a strong believer at the end we need to pass on primary data in the chain.
Thank you.
I think there was one question also here on the side.
Yes, a question in terms of the investment you have to put into the like a project budget for having a system in place. What you have shown. What is your experience in terms? Of course, it's specific company-wise, how big you are, how many production facilities you have, etc. But let's say for a mid-sized company, is it already a multiple million dollar budget you have to take in place, or do you would recommend more to do it phase by phase approach and start not with a very big project organization for that?
Yeah, I mean, good question. What I can say, it's different than, let's say, your S/4HANA implementation, where you run it for years and you have budget overruns and you don't even know what is the budget. So yes, it goes into the single-digit millions to have it, but it depends what you spend on which stage. And how we did it, stage by stage, and also trying to capture value along as you implement, because then you see already the benefit, and then you see what is also the payback period. And this is very transparent, and this is modular, and not as an S/4HANA implementation.
Thank you.
I don't think there is one more question in the front.
Hello. Talking about the payback of this kind of investment, and when what Jochen was saying today needs to make sense from a business standpoint. In your view, when will this be more tangible, more easy to sell a project like this?
Well, I can't give you, we know a bit publicly, what's the green premium you get on a ton of carbon steel. Yeah, if it's flat, it's 250, 300 euros now, and that's balanced and not physical green. On long, it's 70, 80 euros. However, these are not significant volumes. That's what I said there. So, and you need to believe that it actually goes up. I believe that it will go up. So I say the business case is there. There's a good return on invest. But at the end, you need to believe in it. Yeah, and in the Klöckner case, we started joint journey, and nobody of us knew whether the CEO or whether there would be a payoff, but you need to take risk, and it's a bit of what Jochen said. If you believe in it, I would say go all in and start now. But there are a lot of people hesitant and say, and then I would argue, well, there will be some who go all in, and they will take the first mover advantage. So it's a decision you as a management need to decide.
Nicole, thank you very much, by the way. I just stand here corrected. I didn't say blockchain is dead. I'm just saying the blockchain isn't the solution for everything. Once again, I think it was a great and interesting presentation showing us all that, green has a value, most likely in the future, and we need to rather start now. And that data become actually the currency almost of the future there. Yeah, Nicole, also for you, the world for sale. Thank you very much for this. You get a hug from me. And I think you will stick around a bit for questions as well.